As we've seen new reporting, especially from eastern Ukraine right now, where Volodymyr Zelensky was on the front lines now just 48 hours ago. The Russians have changed their strategy in some way, putting more forces up front, which experts suggest may make it more challenging for Ukraine to regain some of the lands that it has lost. Is there any potential for a diplomatic solution here? Does this end in some kind of stalemate? What is the end of this thing? How does it come to a close?
Well, first, right now, there isn't a stalemate. Both sides believe that they can achieve offensive capabilities in the future, right? They both are planning for offensives. So until those conditions are not ripe on the battlefield, I see no possibility for a negotiation. Second, however, the Ukrainians are constrained. They do not have, in their estimation, the kinds of offensive weapons that they need. Tanks, fighter jets, long-range missile systems, these ATACMS, to go on the offensive, and they're worried about a Russian counteroffensive coming as soon as next month. So that's the conditions they're in. That's why Zelensky came to America, came to meet with President Biden first to talk about those things, and then came to speak to all of Americans to talk about why it's important to stay the course.
And Ambassador McFaul, as you know well, President Biden yesterday made it very clear that the U.S. is not providing those offensive capabilities. They're giving the Patriot missile defense system because, as he said, it is a defensive weapon. In his words, if Russia wants it to stop being used, they should stop attacking Ukraine. The Russian embassy, though, they called yesterday's announcement a provocative step. It was stressed that the provocative actions by the U.S. are steadily leading to an escalation, the consequences of which cannot be imagined. That was the statement that was shared from the Russian ambassador to the United States. Do you worry about the Kremlin's response to what it views as an escalation?
Well, of course I worry, and of course that's the job of the President of the United States and his team to worry about escalation. But we need to have data about it, right? First of all, why do they need Patriots? Because Russia is bombing their cities. When Russia wasn't bombing their cities, they didn't need Patriots. Patriots are a defensive weapon. But second, even more importantly, I think, we've heard this threat of escalation all the time. They're doing everything they can to fight the war in Ukraine. They're not constraining themselves. So why should the Ukrainians constrain themselves? And secondly, if we're talking about escalation towards attacking NATO, if you're barely fighting, you've lost 50% of the territory you took in Ukraine, you're barely holding your own against Ukraine. Do you really think Putin is so irrational that at that moment he would escalate and attack NATO? I don't believe that for a second.
So you said that obviously the mindset on both sides is that they can take more gains. They can have more gains there. The Ukrainians, as we know from Volodymyr Zelensky, want those offensive weapons. They're not getting them right now. Without those offensive weapons, are they able to win this war?
Well, I'd say two things. One, they could do it a lot more quickly if they had those weapons. And that's Zelensky's argument, right? We want to end this war as fast as possible. This helps us to end them. Number two, without the weapons, they're still going to keep fighting. I think there's this misperception sometimes here in the United States and in Europe that if they don't have the weapons, they won't fight. That's not just true. They're going to keep fighting. Third, the question you were just talking about, the question you wanted to ask the president about negotiations. Number one, that's a question for Zelensky, not Biden, right? That's not for us to judge. But number two, remember, even if Zelensky might someday in the future think that it's in his national interest to not try to take Crimea, he would be a fool in terms of negotiating with the Russians to mention that now. I negotiated with the Russians. I negotiated when I was in the government. You don't give away anything until everything has been negotiated.
No, I think you're exactly right. And to be clear, that is the question I wanted to ask President Zelensky as I was conflating my presidents there and asking that question of you earlier. Ambassador McFaul, always good to see you. We wish you a great holiday season. Thanks so much.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.